March 11th, 2011. A routine Friday became the deadliest day in modern Japan, but it was only the beginning. A tsunami sent a giant wall of water racing toward the coast. A sudden explosion occurred, something that should not have happened. From that moment, the disaster threatened not just Japan, but the entire world. The first warning signs appeared on March 9th, 2011. At 11:45 in the morning, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake struck off the coast of Sanriku, Japan. 3 more earthquakes occurred on the same day, each exceeding 6.0. Life then returned to normal, and no one knew this was the Earth's first whisper before the roar. On March 11th, 2011, at 2:45 in the afternoon, Japan's earthquake early warning system detected the initial P waves and issued an emergency warning. High-speed trains halted, factories shut down, and children in schools took cover. Only when the ground began to tremble did they realize something was wrong. By then it was too late. At 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9.1 underwater megathrust earthquake occurred in the northwestern Pacific Ocean, at a depth of 18 miles. The epicenter was about 45 miles east of the Oshika Peninsula of Tohoku, Japan. It was the terrifying moment when everything began, a super earthquake and nowhere to hide. Kurihara City and Miyagi Prefecture experienced the strongest shaking, an intensity of 7 on the Japan Meteorological Agency scale. But Tokyo, 232 miles from the epicenter, also witnessed the Earth's wrath as high rises continued to sway for minutes. The tremors were so strong they caused the Earth to wobble about 7 inches on its axis. For 6 endless minutes, the Earth did not stop. Oh my god, this is weird. I've never experienced ground shaking like this. A mother grabbed her son and ran outside. Both survived the earthquake, but the worst was yet to come. When silence returned, Japan did not yet know that the real hell was just happening. Japan's main island, Honshu, had been pushed 7.9 feet eastward, while parts of the coastline had sunk nearly 3 feet. The Cosmo oil refinery burned uncontrollably for days, turning the skyline black with smoke and ash. Almost 200 people lost their lives to the earthquake itself, yet people believed they had survived the worst. But far below the calm-looking Pacific, the real disaster was awakening. Minutes after the earthquake, the ocean began to rise unnaturally. 2:49 in the afternoon, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued tsunami warnings with maximum estimated wave heights of 20 feet. But a GPS buoy detected a terrifying truth. The sea level was rising far faster and far higher than anyone had imagined. This was not a wave, it was a wall. The Japan Meteorological Agency quickly upgraded the tsunami warnings to over 33 feet for Miyagi. 3:21 in the afternoon, a 26-foot-high wave slammed into Miyako in Iwate Prefecture. Miyako's position along the Sanriku coast, with its deep V-shaped bays, funneled and amplified the tsunami's power. The Sanriku district had faced tsunamis before in 1933 and 1960. Protective seawalls were built, but the waves were so high that they overwhelmed everything that day. One man heard the sirens and stepped outside, camera in hand. Nothing could prepare him for what he witnessed. The ocean was moving faster than anyone imagined, swallowing the neighborhood in seconds. He quickly moved toward higher ground, but realized he was not high enough. The water kept rising, tearing houses from their foundations. He survived the tsunami, but a ticking bomb just 100 miles away was about to change his country's fate forever. 3:22 in the afternoon, one coastal region after another was struck by massive waves. In Rikuzentakata, waves rose as high as a 3-story building. At Anayoshi in Miyako City, it climbed to nearly 131 feet, wiping out everything in its path. This was the highest tsunami wave ever recorded in Japan. 3:25 in the afternoon, surging water swept through coastal towns, leaving behind vast stretches of wreckage. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble across a 420-mile stretch of Japan's eastern coast. At Okawa Elementary School in Ishinomaki, about 200 people had gathered following the earthquake. The school stood directly in front of a 700-foot hill that could have provided safe refuge. But something went terribly wrong. Teachers evacuated students to the schoolyard. They gathered outside, waiting for instructions. The tsunami warning blared through loudspeakers. At Okawa Elementary School, confusion reigned. For 51 minutes, the children waited while teachers debated what to do. Some older children suggested climbing the hill behind the school. Several children attempted to run toward the hill. Teachers forcibly returned them to the schoolyard. Some children cried, begging the teachers to let them evacuate up the hill. At 3:37 in the afternoon, finally the group began moving toward a traffic island by the bridge. Immediately after they left the school grounds, a wave of water began engulfing the children from the front. A teacher and several students at the rear turned back and ran toward the hill. Some survived, but other students fell to the ground, unable to flee. The tsunami funneled up the riverbed and reached 8.6 meters in height. 74 children and 10 teachers were killed. Only 4 students survived. Tetsuya Tadano was 11 years old. He was among the last in line when the tsunami struck. He turned around and ran up the hill, but was knocked down and fainted. When he woke up, he was buried under mud and sand. He spent the night in the freezing cold. He lost his 8-year-old brother, his grandmother, and his great-grandmother. He later said those were the things that built who he is, and that he felt the tsunami carved away half of his body. The floodwaters began to recede with almost the same force as when they came in, dragging debris, vehicles, and collapsed buildings back into the ocean. Many people who had clung to debris were mercilessly swept away. By the end of the day, more than 18,000 people had lost their lives. Several thousand bodies were never recovered. The aftermath was unbearable to witness. Entire towns had vanished. There was no place to put this many bodies. The morgues were completely full. In this part of Japan, at this moment in time, there were not enough living to take care of the dead. But while everyone was trying to comprehend the scale of the catastrophe, a more deadly crisis was unfolding at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. When the earthquake struck at 2:46 in the afternoon, the plant lost its main power supply. The reactor switched to emergency diesel generators. Inside the plant, Atsufumi Yoshizawa had no idea that what seemed under control would turn into catastrophe. At 3:41 in the afternoon, a 49-foot-high tsunami wave struck the Fukushima coast, towering over the plant's 19-foot seawall. The wave flooded the plant, destroying diesel generators and electrical systems in the basement. Within seconds, the facility was plunged into darkness. Cooling stopped, and the temperature in the reactors began to rise rapidly. The Japanese government quickly ordered evacuations. Despite desperate attempts by engineers to reduce the pressure, the reactor continued to heat up. By morning, internal components began to melt. On March 12, 2011 at 3:36 in the afternoon, a hydrogen explosion ripped through the first unit, tearing off the roof of the reactor building. The government expanded the evacuation zone to 12 miles, but the nightmare continued. On March 14th at 11:01, the third unit exploded, even more powerful than the first. On March 15th, the second unit began to massively release radioactive gases. A fire broke out in the fourth unit, releasing additional radionuclides into the atmosphere. Fukushima had turned into a full-scale nuclear disaster. Radiation levels inside the plant reached as high as 1,000 times the normal level. So what started as a natural disaster had the potential to become an even more threatening man-made disaster. However, a small group of men, later known as Fukushima 50, stayed inside the nuclear plant. These TEPCO employees, engineers, technicians, and operators had a terrifyingly clear mission: stabilize the reactors, prevent a full meltdown, and contain the radiation at any cost. It is frightening. I believe that being exposed to large amounts of radiation meant certain death, but counteracting that fear was a sense of duty that all of us felt. Yoshizawa and his colleagues remained at the plant for an entire month, working under deadly conditions. Without the Fukushima 50, the nuclear disaster could have been far worse. Neo Kimura lived with his wife and 2 daughters. When the tsunami struck, the waves swept away his father, his wife, and his youngest daughter, 7-year-old Yuna. All that remained was the empty foundation where their home once stood. There was no time to mourn. Neo had to vacate the area because of the looming threat from Fukushima. More than a decade later, the remains of all 111 people who died in Okuma that day have been found, all except for Yuna. By March 20th, power to the plant had been partially restored. The explosions left behind more than just ruins. Radioactive particles spread across Japan, reaching even the United States and Europe. TEPCO admitted that over 10,000 tons of contaminated water had leaked into the ocean. The fallout rendered vast areas uninhabitable. More than 100,000 people remained displaced. The Fukushima disaster became the costliest nuclear accident in history, with expenses exceeding $180 billion. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake was the most powerful ever recorded in Japan. More than 120,000 buildings were reduced to rubble. Nearly 20,000 lives were lost, and thousands remain missing. The total damage reached $235 billion, making it the most expensive natural disaster in human history. Japan has risen to its feet once more, but March 11, 2011 left a scar not only on its land, but on the world's collective memory, a reminder of a power that shows no mercy.